Attitude and motivation are as big of factors in success as talent and natural ability. Our guest today is going to tell you how he's persevered despite becoming a double amputee at age 6 when he was hit by a semi. From placing second in state wrestling to doing Spartan races on his hands, today's guest is like none we've ever had before.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy.
Today's guest is Kacey McCallister. Motivational speaker and gym rat, Kacey is the first double amputee to receive the Trifecta award from the Spartan Obstacle Course Races, as well as be inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Keep it right here. You don't want to miss Kacey's incredible life story and journey.
Kacey, thank you for joining us today. You know, I want to set up the audience on this one because it's really interesting. I was surfing Facebook, which I don't do a ton of because that's not very productive, right? But I was looking at Facebook, and a friend of mine had posted this video, and it was a Spartan race, and I love doing Spartan races. And I'm looking, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. This is not your ordinary Spartan race. And I see you competing in the event. And I'm like, oh, man. I've got to get you on the show. And then literally I just went on the internet. I'm like, Spartan race. And I'm looking at the different tags on it. I'm like, I've got to find this guy. I reach out. I said, Kacey, I need you on my show, man. I got to tell the audience your story. And you're like, cool, man. I am there. And I was absolutely stoked. So welcome to the show, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Glad to be here.
Well, you know, I'm not going to tell the story. I want you to tell the story and start kind of from the beginning of what happened, post-accident, pre-accident. Just bring us through kind of your life to the modern day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my story, I guess everybody's story starts when they're kind of young, but my story of living life a different way started when I was 6 years old. And my family, we were living in Wyoming at the time, but we went down to visit some relatives in Utah. In fact, one of my uncles was about to leave on a mission trip for our church. And so we went down to say goodbye to him and visit with family and whatnot. And after the church service was over, we were standing on the edge of the road, and it was just a divided highway. I mean, I look at them now, I'm like, that's really not that far across. But we were standing on the edge waiting to cross. And my parents were standing right by me, they're a little 6-year-old boy, and they said, okay, Kacey, there's 2 cars coming in a truck. Well, as most 6-year-olds do, I apparently didn't listen too well. And after those 2 cars went by, I started sprinting across the road. Now, what was bearing down on me wasn't just a pickup truck. It was a 18-wheeler that was coming at me. And I guess at the last minute, and I don't remember much of this. I remember standing with my parents, but I don't even remember running. But my mom says at the last minute I dove out of the way, trying to get out of the way of this semi-truck. But the truck hit me. It grabbed my legs and sucked me underneath the wheels. And my parents had to stand there and watch their little boy go through the wheels of the semi-truck. And when it kind of was all over, when I was laying there on the pavement, my dad rushed over and held me, and he saw that my left leg had been completely severed, completely removed by the semi-truck. And he held me and talked to me, but they very soon, of course, rushed me to the hospital. Ambulance came and took me. The local hospital couldn't do much for me there. It was a small Utah town, so instead they life-flighted me to Salt Lake City, to Primary Children's Hospital. It was then that I began my journey. The doctors had to start that journey. They had to figure out how to save this little boy who had just taken on very much a David and Goliath kind of situation. And they eventually ended up amputating my right leg due to the damage, the severity of the damage in the right leg. But I was very much protected. There was something bigger going on, because besides the loss of my legs, I had scrape on the back of my head, busted out some teeth, and broken elbow. But honestly, the only thing besides scars that stayed with me is the loss of legs. So it was very much, I believe very firmly that I was meant for this to have happen. And but the most important thing of all of this started as we were leaving the hospital, and the doctors talked to my mom, and they told my amazing mom, they said, okay, you are not to do stuff for him. He needs to figure out how to do stuff on his own. And my extremely mother, still extremely hard on her, but she took it to heart. And there's one story that goes around my household of, I was sitting there on the ground, coming back from the hospital, and sitting there trying to turn on a light switch, which was, it was out of my reach. I was 6 years old on the ground. But I called my mom, and she came in, and I said, Mom, I really need help. I need help in the light switch. To which she responded, well, figure it out. And she left the room, and when it was too hard, she would just leave, and I'd have to figure it out. Well, I did. I found a baseball bat and turned on the light switch. And that's kind of how it operated throughout my entire life. My parents, and I learned very quickly that I needed to figure out how to do stuff. And in fact, very soon after I figured out that they weren't going to do stuff for me, I just went at it and started figuring out how to do everything on my own. I figured out how to, ride a skateboard. I figured out how to do sports. And in fact, the day out of the hospital, I did a 1 mile race in my wheelchair. Soon after that, I was playing Little League Baseball. The first season, I was pretty weak still, so my dad pushed me around the bases in my wheelchair. But after that, I got off of my chair and started scooting on the ground, playing baseball that way. And it just continued on from there. I eventually did just about every sport you can think of. I tried to do cross country in middle school, but they thought that would be too dangerous for me. I don't know. Apparently, mud is deadly. But I did football that year and wrestled. So I wrestled all the way through high school. Eventually, took second place in state. In high school, I did cross country. Apparently, it's safer in high school, or they just don't care about safety in high school, because I did cross country and eventually took districts in cross country, and as well as track. Competed in track, but that was the easy one for me. It's on this nice hard surface. So but beyond that, I played basketball with friends. I was a scout, so we did 50-mile hikes during the summertime, raft trips, campouts, and really there was nothing to stop me. After high school, I even went on a 2-year mission for my church, kind of bringing it full circle to how I lost my legs in the first place, was visiting my uncle for his trip. So I served a 2-year mission, and soon after that, I got married to a wonderful lady, and we started a family. Well, for the longest time, I'd been a racer. I even went to University of Arizona to do wheelchair racing, which I loved. But after a while, marathons, I know this sounds really weird, but marathons get boring. It's just 26 miles. That's all it is. It's not much for me, especially. I remember before I was really getting into the Spartan races, I did a marathon without any training, without prepping for it at all, and I still had a decent time and enjoyed it. But there was no challenge. I wasn't pushing myself.
Now, Kacey, were you doing the marathons in the chair?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I
all
have a race wheelchair that I was using, and that's where I did my cross country and my race chair track. Okay. And then when I went to University of Arizona, it was I was doing wheelchair racing for him.
Now, people are probably wondering why I would even ask that question, right? They're like, okay, Kacey had an injury, doesn't have any legs. Why would you ask him if he did it in the chair or not? No one's going to do that on their hands. But you probably would be somebody that did it on your hands. The Spartan race, you did entirely on your hands. I don't even know how you did that.
Well, the first time, and, I'm getting bored with these marathons, right? And I still like them. I do a marathon just for fun every now and again. But I was looking for the challenge, and I see this race, and I know for sure that it was going to be tough to do in the chair. And my first one I showed up to, I even brought my chair thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll use it for part of the race. And then as soon as I saw the first part of the race, I decided, well, no, okay, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I went on, I started doing it on my hands. And it is hard and it hurts, but the races are too tough. For those of you that have done Spartan races, it's not a course designed for wheelchairs.
No. No, it's not even designed for humans. They try to make that as tough as possible. Well, you know what? I have a challenge now. Have you ever considered doing a marathon without the chair?
In fact, I have. I was reading a book, and I think his name was Mike Johnson. I think he lost his legs in the military, and he did a marathon just scooting it. And I was as soon as I read this, and this was back in high school when I read his book, I was like, ooh, that sounds fun. It would take a long time, and it took him an extra day or two to finish it. But I was thinking about it. You're like, you know what? I could probably get that thing done in a day. And so that's one of my goals is to do a marathon, and I'm sure I won't make the cutoff time, but at least to scoot, the 26.2 miles out of my wheelchair. So
I don't want you playing small anymore. Come on, man, get going. That is incredible. It's interesting. Last weekend I was in Vermont and we were doing an Everest challenge, 29,029 feet, 17 times up Stratton Mountain. And after, booking the interview with you, I was like, you know what? I think Kacey could do this. I'm like, parts of this, it's going to be difficult, but I think he can get up this mountain. So next year, if we're doing the mountain, I'm sending you information about it because I think it would be absolutely incredible. There was a vet there that was a double amputee that had the blades, and he got up a couple times. I mean, it was tough. It was very slippery, but, it was amazing to see that perseverance in getting up that mountain.
Yeah, no, that sounds like an absolute blast.
All right, your wife's not going to send me hate email, is she?
I don't know if she's resigned herself to the fact that I do these crazy races, but I've convinced her to at least do the beast. Now, if I can do a beast, I can I can climb a mountain, no problem.
All right, good. So, was there any part in the process when you were younger that you were mad, pissed off, angry about the whole thing, or was it did you have a great attitude about it the entire time?
Looking back, I don't know that I'm surprised, but I'm amazed at a little 6-year-old boy, and even through middle school and high school, I never did have a horrible attitude. I never, you talk to a lot of amputees, who it happened to later in life, and they can get upset, and a lot of them, just hang around the house because they figure that's their life. But when I woke up in the hospital and, looked down and saw that I didn't have legs, my mom was right there and she kind of said, Kacey, your legs are gone. And I guess I kind of nodded like, all right, okay, sounds good. And I went back to sleep. And that was my big moment of realizing I didn't have legs. It was, okay, well, I guess that's just going to be how it is now. In fact, I had a harder time adjusting to trying to wear prosthetic legs, which I don't really wear anymore. But when them trying to train me on the prosthetic legs, I hated that more than the thought of not having legs.
Now, do you use some sort of cushion or something? Just the beating on your body in the Spartan race. How do you? You got to watch the video. I'm going to leave a link to the video. By the way, you had 100 million downloads on the video.
Yeah, that's I don't even know. I've kind of stopped counting now, but it looks looks like it's topped 100 million at least.
All right. Well, if you stop counting, let's make sure that you have Google ads connected to that, so at least we can start making some revenue off the 100 million downloads. I'll let you stop counting, but we got to make sure that we're monetizing this.
I do have a family to take care of, so I'm very grateful that it's gone so viral. Getting a lot of good speaking jobs off of this. It'll be great. It's been awesome.
Yeah, that is. When did it go out?
I launched it just the very first part of October, and what was really interesting
this year?
Yeah, just recently. Yeah, because I did the Beast in September. It took me a couple weeks to recover, take care of the family before I could spend some time getting it posted. But just 2 days after I posted it, on YouTube, I had 80 hits on YouTube, and a Russian group picked it up, shortened it for me, and posted it. And by the time I had looked at it, it already had in excess of 300,000 hits. And within days, it just exploded. Within just a few days, it was in the millions. Within a week, it had gone, tens of millions. And now it is what it is. Just 3 weeks after they posted it.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And Kacey, what about your wrestling career? You were quite an accomplished wrestler.
I love wrestling, and to this day, I love these Spartan races, but wrestling to me has always been my favorite sport. I loved wrestling, and I loved coaching. I started off in middle school, 7th grade. I was weighing, I don't know if I was even 80 pounds. I was so small. And I had some friends that started wrestling, and I'm like, that sounds fun. Let's do it. And that first year, I was horrible, just like most kids their first year doing something. But I loved it, and I eventually did win one match that year. Nothing great. I did win one, but I fell in love with it and worked hard. And the next year, better. And then I got into high school. And by my sophomore year, I had made it to state. My junior year, I took 4th place at state. And then, of course, my senior year, my goal was to win the state championship. I wanted to be a state champion. And I trained so hard. I was after practice for at least an hour training. And by the time the state championship came along, I was undefeated through the season, made it all the way to the state finals match. And then I went up against a kid, and I knew who it would be. I knew from the beginning of the season who it would be. I had wrestled him 3 times up to this point and beaten him every single time. But one of the disadvantages of wrestling somebody so many times was that they started to learn how to wrestle a guy with no legs. And he had been training all season just to beat me. And that's what happened. He actually won that state finals match. But I was 2nd place. I took number 2 spot in the state of Oregon, and in every way was the champion. And years later, when I was helping out my old wrestling coach, coaching his team, I was awarded with the Medal of Courage in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So that's a pretty amazing honor to be inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
That is amazing. I wrestled as a kid as well. And your legs, I'm 6'4". So I had the advantage that I was, like 78 pounds, right? I was just like a string bean. But I was so long and I could, get my legs spread out that it was almost impossible to flip me over because there was just the length involved. So that's absolutely amazing. So
yeah, I had to figure out how to adjust, and honestly, these pythons that I call my arms, they helped out a ton. I love looking back at pictures, and it kind of seems like it's another person because it was so long ago. But I look at pictures of me putting kids in the cradle, just crunching them up into this tiny little ball, and their faces are all in pain, and because the strength in my arms was just unbelievable at the time. That's all I was pumping and training, and I'm wrestling 103 pounds, so I have the arms,
right,
that
of a linebacker.
I had arms that rivaled anybody else in the school, so you get a guy with arms that should be on a 170, 190 pounder crunching down on these little 103 pounders. So I definitely found ways to negate the disadvantage, if you say, of not having legs.
And the girls like the biceps. That was the key, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's why I did it. It was for the ladies.
That's why we all do it, right? The other thing, I'm watching the Spartan Race, and I teach fire walking, to walk over hot coals. And I'm watching you, and I'm like, no, he's not going to go over the fire. No, please, you're not going to go over the fire. You went through the fire. What were you thinking?
Well, the first one I did was just a sprint, and by the time I got done, the fire was out. I mean, there was a water pit right before it. The fire was done, and I was disappointed. I was hoping to figure it out. I didn't know how I was going to do it.
You were hoping to walk through fire.
I scooted up to that ring of fire, and it literally is a half circle of fire. It's not a line. I can't just come up to it. I have to go into the fire before I can even think about jumping it. So there I am, surrounded by, a half circle of fire, and the heat is just pounding my face. It's already starting to, burn a little bit like a campfire. And but I had some gloves on, and I knew if I went fast, I might be okay. And so I grabbed 2 logs that weren't as burned, and then just plowed right through the coals. And I survived, so I didn't get burned. But man, that was a pretty insane experience to be jumping through the fire.
All right, I thought maybe that you were trying to enhance your story a little bit. Losing the leg at 6 and then gets massively burned as an adult.
Doing a Spartan race.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is, send me an email to info@thorconklin.com, and I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners, and if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. Decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.
Be on the lookout for part 2 of our conversation with Kacey, where he tells us why time is your most precious commodity and uses that premise to ask, what can I learn today? I'll see you guys on another edition of Peak Performers Podcast.